Welcome to the Spotlight On series, where we get to sit down and speak to some of the most inspirational market leaders from some of the UK's most exciting brands. We'll learn about their careers, their challenges, and their achievements, all to inspire you to help you grow your careers. Hello and welcome to this episode of Spotlight On, where I'm joined by the very awesome Joe from the Barcode Warehouse, where Joe is the marketing director. I guess to kick things off, Joe, tell us a little bit about the Barcode Warehouse and your role as marketing director there.
Yeah, so we like to call the Barcode Warehouse UK's best kept secret. Nice. Because no one knows who they are, but if you work in the industry, you very much know who we are. So, you know, we're the leading solutions integrator for B2B technology. Started life off over 35 years ago, just printing labels. Okay. Then moved into selling printers to print the labels. Yes. And then it just scaled out into mobility tech and auto ID, RFID technology. And now we're lucky enough to resell most of the big brands that you can think of. So in my role as marketing director, I look after obviously the whole breadth of marketing, including e-commerce. So yeah, we're lucky enough to work with brands like Samsung, Android, Epson, Toshiba, you know, all those big brands that you'd expect that businesses use for their technology.
And give us a sort of a sense of the size of Barcode Warehouse as an organisation and sort of the typical type of customers you're marketing to.
Turnover is around 65 million a year, so the business has really scaled. We have 3 quite large sites in Newark, including our iCentre, which is our customer experience and innovation centre, which opened last year officially. And we work with everybody and anybody really in the UK. So if you think of like the top brands that you know we are our household names, they will probably use our technology.
So I guess when I was chatting earlier in the week, kind of prepping for this, we kind of covered some of your like career history as well. Tell me a little bit more, tell the audience a little bit more about kind of your career path before.
Yes, I mean, I would say I've had quite a turbulent career path. Especially my earlier, younger years were fraught with a lot of redundancies, particularly around Christmas, which happened at least 3 times in a row.
Wow. 3 Christmases.
3, yeah. But you know, that was when I was working kind of more public sector, where a lot of work is funding based, and it was quite, you know, I worked in areas like youth funding and things like that. So, you know, your roles could come and go back then.
How did you handle those? Because obviously, you know, people might be looking at yourself at the moment in a fantastic job, great brand, but obviously, you know, gone through those periods in the past. How have you dealt with those, and I guess how have you turned them into positive learnings?
Well, I suppose at the time they feel like the worst thing in the world and you don't know what you're going to do. But the reality is that every time I've had a bad experience, it's always led me to my next one, which has then led me to my next one, which has led me to where I am now. So there's always a silver lining. I mean, you have to take the learnings from it. I mean, every role I had, I picked for a reason because I wanted to gain some experience in something. So I always would have gathered that at that time. And you know, just feel like the end of the world at the time. But I've, you know, always moved on to the next opportunity.
Picked yourself up.
Picked myself up, moved on, you know, did something different, tried different things and experimented. And, you know, each time, you know, you gain more experience and more resilience.
For sure, which I guess we're going to come on to certainly towards the end of the conversation. And then, you know, following those early careers, you've had a stint in sort of 3 slightly more business to business focused brands, but there's Protocol, Might Finch, and can you tell me a little bit about each of those roles, like what you were looking after and almost like what the next role brought to your career development?
Yeah, so kind of a lot earlier on, it was more comms based roles because it was public sector. Then I went to NBV, which is kind of more B2B, but still within the public sector, which was my first kind of experience there, doing something slightly different. And then after that, I started going into kind of the bigger brands. So when I worked at Vets for Pets, which is a Pets at Home brand, while that's a consumer brand, I worked on the veterinary side, which was a B2B area. And then I went into Might Finch, which was pure B2B really, and SaaS. So very, very kind of different and different journey that I wouldn't have known where I would go early on at all.
Something we spoke about in our conversations leading up to that was, you know, there was a point in one of your businesses where you were sort of leading the marketing department where you were almost having to do a lot of convincing around the marketing strategy and the impact it was had, and then that obviously changed into a following role. Can you tell us about those two roles?
Yeah, so I have worked in businesses where obviously if they've recruited a marketing person, they obviously know they need marketing.
Yeah.
The reality is that quite often businesses don't really know how to get the best out of marketing, and quite often see it as a back office function or a glorified administration function, and you can quite often spend most of your time just trying to get stakeholder engagement and buy-in, and you spend, we joke about it, but in marketing you quite often spend 60% of your time trying to get people on your side and to really understand marketing, whereas a very actual small part of your job is actually doing it. And I was very much in roles like that where it was more about explaining what marketing can do rather than just allowing marketing to do.
You knew what needed to be done, but then you had to almost go and convince people that
Absolutely.
It needed to be done. And I guess that brings opportunities in itself, stakeholder management, particularly in development, in trying to do that influencing. And I guess people who are looking at new career opportunities will be able to weigh up the choice of, do I go into somewhere where I've got to do that, because that can be a lot of effort, a lot of energy. But you then moved into a different role where actually the entire business was very much centralised, or very much focused around a centralised marketing function, which was obviously drastically different. And I guess, can you talk about those experiences and what that helped you in your career development too?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was an overnight eye opener. So I worked for a business where really really needed marketing, but didn't quite understand how to use it best, to go into a business where marketing was the core central operation of the business, and it was very much marketing led. It was all lead generation. Leads come in, they go to sales. That's how it made money. So that was going in at the deep end on that one.
And what did you learn in that that transition period, like as a marketer, and then again, as a leader within the business? What kind of learnings did you take from that transition?
I mean, for me personally, it was the first time I had real confirmation that marketing is a real function in a business. Yeah. While I always knew it would, I was always surrounded by frustrations of it not really being seen the same as sales, or or seen as a support role. So it kind of cemented that for me, and it really showed me that you can have a strategic marketing function, and marketing can be a revenue generator, and it can be part of the core strategy and business plan. And not a side function. So then I was really in that role where I kind of went, I know where I want to be now. I want to be in B2B, and I want to be in lead gen. I want to be, sales and marketing aligned, and I want to be at the forefront of the business. It's really easy when you're early on to get blindsided by flashy brands, or a salary or anything like that. But if you're quite early and you really want to learn marketing, you want to be in really a smaller organisation where you get to do the wider marketing piece and don't pigeonhole yourself too early.
Yeah.
So where if you could go to a big company, but you may be one marketer of hundreds, and then you're just one in a cog, and you'll be working in a little silo and not really get to maybe even do budget planning early on in your career, or campaign planning or stakeholder management, because you'll be quite far away from it.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you see certain skill sets lending themselves more to being a better B2B marketer, for instance? I'd say resilience is one of those, and I know we're going to talk more about, but resilience definitely in B2B, because you have a lot more stakeholders, I think. I would say being inquisitive, like genuinely inquisitive, and listening and looking for opportunities and working with wider stakeholders is really, really key to being successful in B2B, because if you want a real effective sales and marketing operation, you've got to be able to operate in that kind of environment and take it all in to know what to do. having, my take on it as well is that, yes, all marketers should be commercially minded, but I've always kind of thought and anticipated that, having a really good level of commercial acumen, understanding the real value, revenue value, profit value of what you're doing kind of lends itself even more so from a B2B perspective. Is it do you agree with that, or actually is there more to that?
No, I do agree with that, but it does depend on where the organisation is on their marketing journey. It's really easy to assume that all B2B marketing is just going to be revenue driving, lead gen. Not all are, because it really depends on what part of the puzzle marketing plays in that function. Where I am now and my most previous roles, marketing is kind of the first part, and it is a revenue driver. So we are very commercially focused. But it is something you can learn, and you can learn in a role. So I would never tell anybody to worry or not apply for a B2B role because I don't feel they have commercial acumen, because it's very different in different roles. And you will learn it along the way. But yes, the main difference is that, you tend to be KPI'd against a revenue figure.
I guess another question slightly off topic, but what you were briefly touching on earlier is you've had a stint in public sector, and I would say that there's probably very often a misconception of, if you work in the public sector, it's much slower paced, it's, harder to progress and stuff like that. What's been your experience as being a marketer in the public sector, and again, thinking about advice to anyone that's potentially watching, is that a good option for people to explore? If so, what sort of traits do people need to succeed, I guess, in the public sector?
When it comes to public sector, I think, it isn't necessarily slow, like what everyone would think, to go, I have had just as slow experiences in the private sector, where bureaucracy might be taking over, or, it might take you longer to get budgets approved. I would say public sector wise, it is more of a comms role, and it is a very different world, and your marketing will be different in what you're doing in public sector, because generally what you're doing is communicating on whatever a project might be, with the general population. That's generally the core of marketing in the public sector. Whereas if you go to B2B, you will be selling a product to other businesses, and it's going to be focused on lead gen. So they are quite different. So, I would say it's good to try everything, and don't pigeonhole yourself too early. But also don't assume that if you go down one marketing route, that's going to set you up for the other either, because there are differences.
You spoke about having a personal ambition, a personal target of, wanting to be a director by the time you're 40, which I believe you've achieved.
Yeah, without giving my age away.
How important is it for everyone to set, professional goals within their career that are not necessarily next year or the year after, but long-term goals? And also, I guess, following on from that, what can we do to help ourselves achieve those goals?
I think it's good to have a long-term goal, but not necessarily marry yourself to it, because things, what you're thinking right now, you may be in a completely different place 15 years later. I didn't know where I was going to be. So it's important to have something that's long-term, but remain flexible on that, so that it doesn't, it doesn't stress you out to that point. I always knew earlier, I've always been ambitious, was from day dot, I've always been that kind of personality. So I kind of knew where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a director, but I never said whether I wanted to be a marketing director.
Yeah, okay.
And as you mentioned, yes, I did achieve that with some time spare. So that worked for me. But in order to get there, it's really important to set yourself the short-term objectives and goals, because they're more achievable and they're more realistic, and your journey will just feel easier. It would have been very easy for me to have got disheartened back then at the councils when I was working there, constantly getting made redundant, going, I'm never going to be a director. But my objectives then were, I want to learn how to do web development, or I want to learn how to do this. And it was very bite-sized in order to grow.
You're kind of a great example of what can happen, if you have that grind, if you have that resilience. But ultimately you've had what sounds like a minimum 3 major setbacks early on in your career. how did you build that resilience, and kind of how can we as humans as well as employees work on our own resilience, because it must be tough.
It is tough. It's quite a hot topic, really, and it's probably something that I don't ever remember it being talked about in my earlier career. You're either a tough nut or you weren't.
Yeah.
And there was kind of no in between. I have a fairly resilient personality naturally, but it's not complete, and I do get knocked back, and I still can get knocked back now. But I think the difference is to be able to really look at the situation from the outside, and reflect on what you could have done differently if there is anything. And quite often, especially redundancies, quite often there isn't. So you just have to that's it. You just have to pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and crack on. But kind of more in the modern world, as I'm showing my eyes now, aren't I? The more modern world, resilience is talked about more, and employers are a bit better really at supporting employees. I mean, I think because I've been through it, I can support my teams better. But resilience, people talk about it in general for any role, and it's really important. But as a marketer who's been, through the trenches, I would say that people think that marketing is the fluffy job.
Yeah.
It's that it's the nicer job within an organisation. But I would probably say it's one of the biggest jobs you do need some resilience on, because there are pressures from everywhere. Marketing's one of those jobs that if you make a mistake, everyone can see it.
Yeah.
That's what I always say. So you've got to be able to brush things off, but learn from those mistakes as well, and own them too. And I think really, it really is just making sure that you learn from every mistake, but don't let it kind of dwell.
Yeah.
And don't let it drag you down.
Jo, I know obviously resilience is something you've spoken about a lot. And what I would say is for anyone watching or listening that can, I guess, relate to that, definitely find Jo on LinkedIn, because I know you publish quite a bit of content around that as well. And I've found it super useful myself. And yeah, again, thank you very much for the talk today. I think that's been some really interesting points covered, and hopefully lots of people find value from the content.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. For more content like this, don't forget to sign up to our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social.